Hi, Paul Coker here from onebloodydrop.com. Today I'm here at the Bristol Royal Infirmary with Dr. Rob Andrews, and Dr. Rob Andrews is a diabetologist, and he has a practice where he specialises in diabetes and exercise, amongst other things. So thanks for joining us today, Dr. Andrews. Perhaps you could give a quick introduction, because I'm sure my introduction has not done you justice. Your knowledge is far superior to the information that I just gave the audience.
No, I think you called it exactly correct. I'm just a diabetologist that takes care of people with diabetes, and my interest is giving advice to people who are going for events, so marathons or events they've never done, or giving advice to people who are trying to go up the sporting prowess, so elite people, semi-elite people, or people who are Olympians, and to add to that advice, because I always found that the advice wasn't as evidence-based as you can do. I apply for grants and get money to lead a team in Exeter where we try and answer those questions.
Fantastic. And excuse me, I know from our previous videos where we were talking about diabetes and aerobic exercise that I learned so much from you in just a few minutes, and I'm really excited now to be asking you, if I'm doing aerobic exercise and I have type 1 diabetes, how should I manage my type 1 diabetes? And perhaps we should start there with what is anaerobic exercise.
So anaerobic exercise is what we kind of call short and fast exercises. So it's exercises that you're doing very briefly, and you're trying to get as much power as you can, and on the whole is less than a minute. So the longest that you can do an event without getting full oxygen is roughly a 400-meter run. The best of the best can do that in 40 seconds, but most of us it takes a minute and 20. So it's any exercise that the bit that you do is less than a minute and 20. That doesn't mean you can't do a number of them, but the actual one episode that you do is less than a minute on the whole. So
typically explosive kind of power events, things like sprinting and perhaps weightlifting.
Yeah.
And so in our earlier video, we were talking about how you manage your diabetes before you do aerobic exercise, which is a continuous form of exercise. So how would you differ? What would you do to manage your type 1 diabetes in anaerobic exercise?
I think the thing about aerobic, and you need to know that it is the case for you, but most people who have type 1 diabetes, when they do an anaerobic event, find that their blood sugars go up during the event, and that's because it's a short, sharp event you're doing at high intensity. The body releases hormones to get as much glucose out, to flood the system with glucose so that it's available for the activity. So the glucose, even in people who haven't got diabetes, goes up, but they quickly produce insulin to pull it down again, and that gives you a bit more leeway. So before we were talking about, we're worried that the glucose is going to fall during an event, so we start thinking about what are we going to do with our insulin. To reduce the insulin, do we need to take anything to eat before? So what I tend to say to people when they're first doing anaerobic is suck it and see. Do the event, measure your blood sugar before and see what happens with it, and then see whether you do need to make any adaptations. So if you're exercising within 2 hours of the meal, I don't get people to change their insulin dosages or just say, let's just see what happens, because actually sometimes having that excessive amount of insulin around is helpful to stop it rising too much. And I don't tell them if they're doing it that actually, unless it's very low, and I kind of say if it's not lower than 5, that you need to take any carbohydrate, and then just monitor it. The good thing about doing an anaerobic event is that it's a bit easier to do blood sugars, because you're doing the weights and you're not doing something continuous, so you can stop in it and just check it the first couple of times you do it and just see whether it's falling, whether you need to take anything during it. But most times people don't, so it gives you a bit more leeway. You don't quite have to have a plan in place, right? It's just more monitoring and finding out how it affects you.
So in our video on aerobic exercise, we talked about there being a bandwidth of blood glucose level that you should aim to be at before you start. Is there an equivalent in it?
So yeah, so we would normally say if it's less than 5, then you need to take something. But as we said with anaerobic, we're very worried that in that first 10-15 minutes it's going to fall. So we want you to have a bit of leeway. So we wanted it to be 7. But the fact it's likely to go up if you're 5, we're happy for you to start. But just check it's fine.
And what about an upper limit?
So the upper limit's exactly the same. It's 15. So we don't want you to exercise for 15. And of the two sports, the one we would worry about more you doing is this sport, because you've not got enough insulin around, so the glucose might go up. Obviously, if you're doing an event where you're pouring out loads and loads of glucose, there's a real risk that it will go up very high.
Okay. So essentially, I think that if I've understood you correctly, the key messages here are to measure your blood glucose level and understand the direction in which your blood glucose level is going before you exercise, which is the same for aerobic exercise. And to consider taking carbohydrates on board if you're below 5 millimoles.
Or the direction of the two ones been falling.
And to not exercise if your blood glucose level is above 15. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. That's really, really useful advice. And in our next video, we're going to be talking about how you manage your blood glucose levels during anaerobic exercise. And we'll see you on the next video.